Well, I hope you're safe at home, practicing your social distancing. I wanted to start something a little different with you guys. Instead of just doing some planning and some sketch work and some ideas for projects that hopefully we'll be able to get to if we go back to the classrooms before the school year is out. But since we are going to be at home for the next month, I wanted to be able to do some actual projects with you that were interesting, something brand new for you guys, and some things that you might not have ever thought of doing before. So the first thing we're going to start with is a project where we are going to be creating stop motion animation. Now, stop motion animation is a technique that is used in animation to bring static objects to life on screen. These could be anything from figures made out of animation style clay, such as what you would see in claymation, as in the pictures from Wallace and Gromit below, or they could be Lego figures like you see in the Lego movie, or they could be toys that you might see in a show like Robot Chicken. So the way this is done is by moving your object in very small increments and very small movements while filming one frame per increment. So normally a television show is filmed at about 24 frames per second. And stop motion animation is usually brought down to about 12 frames per second. And then there's some editing to make it last a little longer. But once you have all of these individual photos taken, which are what we're calling frames, when all the frames are played in sequence, it shows movement. So it will look like more of a video sort of a thing when it's all photographs. So clay figures, puppets, and miniatures are often used in stop motion animation, as they can be handled and repositioned easily. So one of the keys to this is that you're telling a story within a certain amount of time by barely moving your figures. And it's not just, I move this figure for this action, then I move this figure. But, if you're going to have things naturally reacting, there's going to be motion all over the place. So I want to give a brief history of what stop motion animation is, but instead of me telling it to you, I'm going to let an expert on the subject tell it to you.
All right, class, settle down. Time to settle down. I said settle down! So it's simple enough to watch old animated movies, but can we get some real inspiration and ideas from these historical works? Let's at least try, shall we? During the silent movie era, animation got started with film experiments involving real-life objects moved about one frame at a time. You may not want to animate a couch walking around, but it's fun to animate toys and found objects. Meanwhile, a Russian entomologist, Ladislav Starovich, built realistic armatures so he could animate real insects. His first film was The Cameraman's Revenge. As you can see, there's more to stop motion than just creating basic armature puppets. George Pal may have been the most prolific of the early puppet animators. In 1940, Pal created the animated series called Puppetoons, using replacement animation. Pal made carvings on puppet heads and body parts in order to show different facial expressions and movement. We're still using the replacement method for facial animation and transformation effects. From the early days of feature films, stop motion has been used for creature animation. Willis O'Brien experimented with realistic animated puppets for The Lost World in 1925. This led to the most celebrated animated monster in movie history, King Kong. It's certainly a lot of fun to animate real or fantasy creatures instead of sticking to your basic human puppet, the present company accepted. But perhaps the greatest inspiration for stop-motion artists is Ray Harryhausen, who combined live action with models in front of a rear projection screen. Even if you're not incorporating live action, you can look to these movies for creative inspiration. What sort of creatures could populate your animated movies? Art Clokey is one of the original television animators and is best known for creating Gumby and Pokey. You can certainly see a lot of tricks used to save time and money in these shows, but they certainly still remain entertaining. Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass joined forces for the television production company Rankin Bass to produce such classics as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Here we can see how time is well spent creating detailed, imaginative sets. Will Vinton took clay animation to the next level by using flexibility for expressive facial animation and imaginative effects.
I wonder what makes it work.
The Will Vinton Studio created a number of TV specials and animated the Singing Raisins. Consider having everything in one of your movies looking as though it was all made of clay. After Tim Burton directed some live-action hits, Disney let him produce a story that he developed while he was at the studio. Tim Burton enlisted Henry Selick to direct The Nightmare Before Christmas, a film that continues to inspire upcoming stop-motion animators, perhaps because it pushes the quality and creativity of puppets and miniature effects while still maintaining a completely handmade look. In 2005, the former Will Vinton studio changed its name to Laika, and went on to produce the Tim Burton film Corpse Bride. Since then, Laika has produced a library of 3D stop-motion features that push the art form and incorporate modern technology. On television, the CBS Saturday morning television show Pee-wee's Playhouse was a highly innovative showcase for animators. I encourage all animators to watch these animated segments for creative inspiration. In fact, that's your homework. Nick Park joined Aardman Animation Studio in England, and his characters, Wallace and Gromit, became a worldwide hit. Their distinctive style has carried over into their other features as well.
This is a football.
And now, even in this age of computer animation, stop motion maintains a strong presence on television and streaming services with the likes of Robot Chicken, Tumbleleaf, and Lego Animation on YouTube. So stop-motion animation continues to inspire artists young and old who... Oh dear, out of time. So your homework is to look at the works of these masters and see what new directions you can take your own projects. Would someone get the lights, please?
So, as you can see, there's a rich history behind stop-motion animation. Not only using, created objects, but also using found objects. And I want to take a look at just a couple images of different things you could use to create your own stop-motion animation. Nope, there we go. So, the top three images is a very, very rough sort of sequence of photos that you could consider, if you played these back to back, would be an animation. That is of this stapler opening it up and eating an orange. These are just two objects you might find laying around your house. In the bottom image, you have basically a young child's farm toy set. And now you could move these tractors around in the truck. You could move the figures that are in them around, have them interact some way to create an animation, just moving them a little bit at a time. You can even take things like paper, colored paper, be that construction paper or cardstock or whatever it might be, and create an animation that is very two-dimensional. It's very flat, but you're still cutting out and you're still creating these things, and you can actually have quite a bit of control by doing that. You can also use toys such as Lego, action figures, Barbie dolls, whatever the case might be. These are nice because they do have some movement to them. Their legs move a little bit, their arms move, their heads can tilt. You can bend them at the waist, so you can get quite a bit out of that. You could go ahead and use truly everyday objects, salt and pepper shakers, hairbrushes, hammers and nails, whatever you can find around your house that you can tell a story with and have those things look like they're moving on their own. So what I would like to do now is I want to show you 3 different videos of 3 different types of stop motion animation. The first is using just objects and you are just seeing the animation. The second animation I want to show you is going to make use of the objects. In this case, it's going to be Lego, but it's also going to use a live action person. Now, what I want you to take into consideration is none of this is filmed using video. All of the motion is done with photos, so it's frame by frame animated. So it is still stop motion animation, even though it's using a real person. And now finally, the last bit of stop motion animation I want to show you is one where they're only using actors. There are no kind of objects to be animating, but it is still going to be told, I'll say, the animation parts of this are shown just frame by frame, photo by photo to create this image.
Nice try.
So there you have 3 different types of stop motion animation. So one of the things I'm going to want you to do is to think about, one, what type of stop motion animation are you going to want to do? Because you're going to be creating your own. So are you going to use just objects in there? Are you going to have objects and people mixed in? Are you going to have just people? Are you going to do this with 3-dimensional objects or 2-dimensional objects where they're flat, like the construction paper ones? To finish this off, I just want to show you some examples from the last time that I taught this lesson, which was back in 2013. And I did this as a few group projects, and they did this using animation clay. So there was a lot of work that went into the sculpting of this, and you're going to see some things that work really well, and you're going to see some things where there are some major mistakes that happen, especially with the backgrounds, but we're going to be getting into that in the next lesson. And so there you have it. Some student animations. Now, some of them were smoother than others, some of them were rough. One thing to consider is when you create your animations, you are only going to be telling about, let's call it 15 to 30 seconds worth of a story. So I'm going to put the directions for what I would like you to do for today's assignment in the classroom assignment if you're using Google Classroom, and if you had to come in for the flash drive, it's going to be as a document within the folder. But basically what I want you to do to start is to brainstorm. What do you want to tell in a story? And keep it really brief, because you're only going to be showing about 15 to 30 seconds worth of time. Think about, what do you want your story to do? Who are the characters in it? What are you going to use for making these characters? Do you have toys? Do you have Play-Doh? Do you have, construction paper? There's a lot of different things you can do. So that is what we're going to do for today's assignment. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the sets that you're going to make and some of the ways to make it easy and some downfalls that you can have. So as I leave, I'm going to leave you with this picture of Shaun the Sheep because he is the best form of stop motion animation because he's a sheep.